Thank you so much for joining us for our Thursday Kava Ministries podcast. This is Allison Huckabee, and we are excited that you're joining us this evening. And not only are we excited about you joining us, but we're excited about our guest for this evening. We are talking about the Tamar Experience, the Up and Coming Summit, which will be in Lebanon, Tennessee on April the 27th, 2024. And there are many components to this particular summit, but we are focused on the two Tamars in the Bible and their experience and how God delivers us and heals us through this process. So we are going to introduce our guest for you this evening. This is the start of the Tamar Experience. And again, this is Cinny Roy. Yay, Cinny Roy. And I'm going to I'll introduce her. I'm going to let her start from there. And then we'll have a discussion again about trauma and what it looks like and how we can be healed and delivered from it. Cinny Roy.
Allison, thank you. It is an honor to be a guest on the Kava Ministries podcast. And this is a difficult topic, but I come as a woman, a married woman, a mother, a grandmother. I'm also a licensed professional clinical counselor and supervisory staff in the state of Ohio. And I have the truly privilege of meeting with women who have had different experiences in their close relationships. So often we hear about childhood sexual abuse and the breaking of trust at all ages, from infants on up, and what that does to a woman, and to a girl, and to a boy. But today we're going to talk a little bit about what that does to a woman when she is in a relationship and she is overpowered by someone that she thought she was safe with. And so one of the things I would suggest to everybody in the audience is, first off, let's breathe. Just take in a couple of breaths and realize that we are victors, victorious women in Christ. And that just because this is a tough subject doesn't mean that it is meant to destroy us. And I want to give hope and encouragement as we talk a little bit farther about that. So, Allison, is that a good starting spot?
That is a great starting spot. And that really talks directly and speaks directly to the trauma that especially Tamar and 2 Samuel experienced. And so, Cindy, as we talk about the trauma of having experienced any type of sexual abuse or physical abuse, what would you suggest, Cindy, if someone has, or even how can they protect themselves if they're living with someone who may be physically or sexually abusive, more sexually abusive than anything, where there's control, where sexual abuse is being used as a control mechanism? What would you suggest that they do, and how would that look? What would that look like?
Great entry into these. Well, one of the things about abuse, which is really sin, being the god of the relationship, trying to overpower someone. Abuse destroys three things. It takes away a woman's voice, it takes away her control, and it destroys the relationship at a very deep level. And so part of what empowers a woman is to understand what is happening, not just the emotions of it, the sensory of it, but to recognize these are the things that have been taken from her against her will. And so one of the first things that I would suggest is be kind to yourself. Do not take on guilt of what has happened. Do not take on shame that there's something wrong with her, with the personhood. But find somebody that she feels is safe that she can break the isolation and use her voice to express the confusion, which is so often around us, the confusion around what has happened or is being threatened to her. And it's because very often, on top of the physical, is emotional, is verbal, is often spiritual, and so she may feel confused about what has been happening in this relationship. A relationship in God's eyes is mutual respect, mutual desire to care for the other person. And so learning that what is healthy versus what she may be experiencing is important. So first is to use a voice and to talk to someone, not confront the person necessarily because that may bring right repercussions, but someone she can feel safe with and start to sort this out. And then secondly, being kind to herself, using her voice and education and recognizing what's been happening to her. First to start for her.
Right, and that's important for them to first recognize it because, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, saying I think sometimes when a woman has been abused, has been abused, or the abuse process has started, if they haven't come from that background, if they didn't see that growing up in their household, then that can they may not recognize exactly what it is, or they may not have a name for it to put to it. They just know that something is wrong, and so am I hearing you right to say that you have the right to put a name to it? This is how you identify it?
Yes, the relationship has been distorted when there's an interaction, physical, emotional, especially the sexual, that is disgusts them, hurts them, brings a feeling, something of fear, of trauma, of like what just happened. This was not what was expected. My voice was taken away from me. So she comes out like that, and then very often it's well, I'll just keep going because the perpetrator, the other person, acts like nothing has been amiss, which again adds to her sense of crazy thinking or crazy feeling, and that distortion and something's wrong with me. Also, in our culture, unfortunately, women are raised to believe it must have been her fault. I must have done something wrong. Or I didn't do enough of something, or I brought this on because we immediately assume that it's been our responsibility because that's what's been forced on us. So there's just all these different things that can be feeding her, and she feels gross out by herself, and yet she's supposed to suppress it. In other words, ignore it. And yet our whole body retains memory. We remember what it smelled like, what it felt like, what it sounded like, what we heard, what we saw is what is a complete memory. So all of her is impacted by this and can be very traumatized. So breaking the isolation, loving on herself, using her voice to speak up, and learning about what has taken place, then she can look about how to change interactions in the future if she's in a position where she needs to remain in that environment.
So circling back for a minute to one of the experiences of Tamar, do you find it, well, let me say this, I'm sorry, I don't want to get ahead of myself. One of the experiences of Tamar was that she found herself with a man. She was married to a man who she married into a family of dysfunction. Her husband was extremely cruel, emotionally cruel to her. And he was so cruel that God killed him. And so I know in that culture that the next person that she was to marry would be a brother and so forth to keep the family line going. And I know in this particular case, none of those things happened. The father-in-law didn't keep his word, and so she wound up um, um, presenting herself to the father-in-law as a prostitute and wind up having sex with him, and she got pregnant. And it's like a modern day TLC
reality TV.
Yeah, reality TV program. And she did this. I look at it as she did this as a means to survive, to have a legacy for her children. Can you speak to that even in today's society? What happens from that trauma to a woman that would make her go to those extremes in order for her to still live and what we would consider succeed? Can you speak to that, and what would be other ways that she could possibly help herself without going through those, without her putting herself through that extreme of putting herself in those places to be abused?
It's difficult because of for this sweet woman that you're thinking of and others that I've known, the history of beating her down emotionally, in terms of a person, how she's been gifted by God, restricting her financially, restricting her mobility, restricting her freedom to decide and act without being tracked very often, and scrutinized at all times, distorts her ability to see clearly, because she's seeing through the lens of that person who's been taking advantage of her. And everything that she does is measured against whether this will please that person. When the situation alters and often becomes worse, again, that survival of trying to keep going, and she isn't able to think clearly. We've all known someone that we say, how could she? She's a professional. She's a teacher, a police officer, a lawyer, other counselors, a member of our church. How could this happen to her? What was she thinking? They're putting that hat on her and not seeing that she's a woman who's been in distress. Deep distress, isolated distress, almost kept a prisoner in the relationship. And so it is very difficult to break out of that. Very often we go to keep ourselves safe, and while we know healthy, we see it over there, we don't know how to do it. And so we continue, because we know the rules of engagement, even though it might be a big pen relationship and a very disgusting, dirty, unhealthy, abusive relationship. At least I know how to keep myself safe, and I can recognize the cycle of when things are building towards a conflict, and then what the process is afterwards. And so very often she will stay, one, because not understanding that there truly are options. She may stay because we're made hopeful people. God made us hopeful. And we keep thinking, well, maybe if I can get him to, and we buy that into that life cycle of it's our responsibility. Another component is he has said to her, well, no one would love you. No one would like you. I'll keep the money from you. I'll take the children from you. I own you. And that is repeated enough that she believes in it. But there is hope. And that's what's so wonderful about it, is God it never abandons us, even in those moments of extreme distress. But we cannot guilt ourselves as women when we're backed into the corner, and we do whatever we can to survive at that time, because that's all the option that we know to do at that time. So we mustn't ever judge a woman because she stayed longer, or why didn't she. We have no understanding of why she hasn't at that moment. But we need to be close to her and be able for her to find that she can begin to edge out and find freedom.
I like that. Can you elaborate some more on how God can come in and be that healer, that deliverer for women, and how they can seek that help out?
Yes, I think it's in Ephesians. We'll have to look that up. But in
Okay.
Ephesians, it's about the width and the length and the height and the depth of God's love for us. And think about it. No matter how far we fall, God is even farther below us to catch us. There's no depth that He does not understand. Nor can we get so far away from Him that the length of His arm cannot reach Him and retrieve us. We can't outrun Him. Nor can our simple attempts with our short, stubby arms limit that He will not reach to us. It's not a matter of us how far we reach to Him. He reaches to us. Nor is God so high and so lofty that He does not draw near us. We think of Him as being high and in the heavens, but He is just ever so present. And so His love for us is so broad. The oceans, the breadth of the oceans, the expanse of the universe is how big He is. So no circumstance that we find ourselves in can stymie His presence, His closeness, and His desire to be with us. So often we think, well, look where I am. Where is God? Where could He be? And yet we don't realize He protects us every day in so many ways that we cannot even see. And the fact that He draws near to us and brings other people into our lives and other ways to interact besides the abusive situation one is in. We need to look and see where He is at all times.
I like that. I like the way you talked about that there's no depth, there's no shortness, nowhere that we can go that God cannot heal us, deliver us, and bring us out of that situation. And not only can He bring us out and deliver us, but He will deliver us so well and heal us so well that we don't even recognize ourselves. We won't even recognize the trauma years later because He is such a powerful and healing and good God. And I think that's so important to get that message across. Not only is there healing available and deliverance available for us, but He does it so well that it's in His perfection towards us that we don't even recognize ourselves years down the road. When we look in the mirror, we realize that we are so worthy of His love and that we can be we can stand strong and tall without any shame. I like how you talk about, how God can take away the shame of it. I think that's important for women to remember. Can you elaborate now on, I know you're in Cincinnati, Ohio, where if women are going through those challenges and they need to speak to someone, where they can go and how that can look for them?
Very often they isolated somewhat. We put our walls up to keep the bad out, but unfortunately we put our walls up to keep, and the good has to be kept at place too. So one of the first things to do is to look for opportunities in your own realm, in your own area. Are you attending church? Can we get into a women's Bible study? Build support for yourself right in the community where you are. This way you're not threatening the other person that you're in the relationship with, because sometimes they're very leery of what you might get involved in. Even going to a counselor, there have been men who have not wanted the pastor to know what's going on, not wanting the counselor to know what's going on, but get within a circle of women who are seeking the Lord so that you can get refreshed. and have a moment of starting to think clearly a little bit. That empowers and strengthens you just to have a break from what's been taking place. Another opportunity, if it's possible, is to take advantage of any learning opportunity that your employee offers. Very often, the human resources department of companies, restaurants, stores, all of them these days, mental health can be just attending seminars. And so that doesn't have to necessarily be costly or time consuming or threatening to the relationship person. And just to take advantage of easy things, low hanging fruit, some of those things like that. If there is threat of physical harm, then with the person, I'm going a little bit to the other end of the spectrum, someone can call their police department, not the 911 line, but everybody has what's called a back office number. And just run a hypothetical by the responder and say, if this and this is taking place, what do you all recommend? They don't need to know a name or a number, but you can hypothetically ask them about an option of what you can do. Also, there are the YWCAs, the Red Cross, other organizations that have support for women who are struggling in domestic abuse things going on. But for the woman who doesn't feel that God is giving her the release, the best thing to do is try to take advantage of ways to grow herself, maintain the relationship the best she can. Another thing that I just thought of is we often are the last ones that we take care of. We take care of children, we take care of our cars, we take care of the dog, we take care of the neighbor, we take care of our family, and we're the last one to be given a go card. Make sure she that takes advantage of an annual physical. A doctor, a physician's assistant, and nurse can tip information to that person in terms of how you are mentally, physically, and they're supposed to be paying more attention these days to asking questions about harm in the home and things like that, and get some support that way too. So just edging out, using your voice, gathering information, just getting around other people is primary. There would be more education and learning about what the options are. One of the things could be that she just needs to communicate what she's uncomfortable with. Sometimes we assume that someone's taking advantage of us when we really haven't tried to use our voice. And so I always think you can't blame somebody if you don't tell them. We can complain and grumble about things, but if we don't try to communicate that need, and then that can be difficult. And so sometimes it means taking just an index card or a piece of paper and writing down what is it that I'd like to express. That way you can practice, and then finding a calm moment to bring something up. Can't control the outcome, but at least you know you tried. And they can't say, well, you never said, you never told me, that kind of thing. So sometimes we have to realize that the men in our lives, women in our lives, others in our lives, they cannot read our minds, and that we need to be a little clearer in our communication. What else should we bring up, Allison?
I think that you have covered a lot. So, because you, like I stated before, you are in another city, are there any organizations in Cincinnati that you recommend, or places that you, like you named off, that they could go to if they felt the need to see a counselor or somebody just to talk to? I know you mentioned local church, the local churches. maybe if they're not a Christian, a synagogue, mosque. But are there any other places that's just designed for women that they could go to?
Well, in the greater Cincinnati area is aidcenter.org. That's a faith-based organization with trained peer counselors to serve women aged 18 and above for every issue you can imagine. It's aidcenter.org, like Aid in the Bible. That's one that's well respected in the greater Cincinnati area. There's also, you can Google hotlines and helplines and care lines and things like that. Again, depending on her safety, if her phone records are checked, you might want to do that at the public library to look some things up using a different connecting source than her phone or her own computer. Just depends a little bit on what she's got going on available. Also, radio stations, Christian radio stations, for those who are believers that would be listening to your podcast, have prayer lines, and also just having worship music in your environment helps drive out evil and raise the presence of the Lord. So that's another thing that she can do that's beneficial for herself. And just trying to think of some easy things that are available for her to grab hold of, depending on what's going on in her situation.
Thank you so much. Those are wonderful suggestions and directives that women can go to and have those services available. I hope all the women who are listening, or men who are listening, or family members who are listening, took heed and are able to write that information down. Again, that was aidcenter.org in Cincinnati, Ohio, Greater Cincinnati, Northern Kentucky. Again, I'll say it again, aidcenter.org. Thank you, Cinny, so much for joining us today. I appreciate it. This is Kava Ministries, part of our Tamar Experience Summit. As we go through this process of helping women overcome trauma and abuse, and helping them be able to not just heal, but become delivered and made whole the way that God has created beautiful women to be, because we are special to God. We appreciate everyone that's going to participate in this process in advance. And you all will hear from Cinny again down the road. Again, this is Cinny Roy, my lovely sister in Christ, who I love and adore so much. Thank you for your time. We appreciate it. This is Kava Ministries. Thank you so much for joining us. If you would like to continue to support us, please go to $Kava Ministries. We would definitely appreciate our donations, especially for this process. Thank you again for joining us.